worst trade I ever made didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in 10 minutes, in a parking lot, with my pride louder than my sense. My name is Raymond, and I'm 78 years old. I traded 30 years of freedom for 10 minutes of anger, and now I count decades by meals and headcounts. I keep a small calendar taped beside my bunk. Every night I cross off one more square with a dull pencil. The X marks started neat. Now they're thick and pressed hard, like I'm trying to pin time down. Some nights I don't even read the month. I just make the mark because I need proof I made it through another day, in a place where days can disappear into each other. Most of prison isn't a movie. It's routine that never relaxes. Count at dawn. Chow hall. What detail? Yard if they run it. Count again. Lights out. You learn the sounds, keys, gates, the scrape of boots on concrete. You learn how the air changes when something is about to go wrong, and you learn to keep your face steady even when your stomach isn't. I wish I had learned how to keep my temper steady before I got here. Before prison, I was the kind of man people called reliable. I worked with my hands, paid bills, showed up for my kids. I wasn't a drunk, I wasn't a liar, I wasn't looking for trouble. But I carried something sharp in me, and I told myself it was strength. I thought being willing to explode meant nobody could push me around. What it really meant was I didn't know how to be disrespected without trying to punish somebody for it. The day that broke my life didn't start like a tragedy. It started like a plain weekday that already had me rubbed raw. I was in my late 40s. Money was tight. My house felt tense in quiet ways. My wife asked me that morning if we were going to be okay, and her voice wasn't accusing, just tired. I remember nodding like I had answers. I didn't. I left the house with that pressure sitting behind my ribs, and I carried it into the world like a loaded thing. The spark was small. A careless bump in a parking lot, a sharp remark from a stranger who looked at me like I was in his way. I cannot tell you the exact words now, but I remember the tone. I remember the heat rushing up my neck. I remember how my mind snapped into a narrow tunnel where only one thing mattered. I would not be talked to like that. That's how anger lies to you. It makes humiliation feel like danger. It makes backing down feel like dying. I stepped toward him. He stepped toward me. People walked by with grocery bags, not realizing they were about to watch the moment my life split in two. There was shouting. There was that stupid childish need to win. I said things that don't even sound like my voice when I hear them in my head now. He answered back, and then my hands did what my mouth had been promising, a shove, one shove, the kind people do every day and forget by dinner. He fell wrong. That is the sentence that has haunted me for decades because it sounds so clean. It wasn't clean. He hit the pavement with a sound I still hear at night when the unit gets quiet. The anger drained out of me so fast it felt like cold water. For a moment I told myself he'd sit up. He didn't. Somebody screamed. Someone yelled at me to get back. I remember kneeling, my hands out, not knowing where to put them, suddenly aware that my body had done something my regret could not undo. The sirens came like a judgment. The cuffs went on. 10 minutes became a hallway, then a holding cell, then a courtroom. In court, they spoke about me like I was a stranger. They had met at my worst moment. They spoke about the man who died like an empty chair at a table, like a voice that wouldn't answer anymore. He had a family. That's the part people forget when they tell themselves their anger is private. When the judge said 30 years, my brain refused to accept it. 30 years sounded like a distant mountain. It did not sound like the air I would breathe every day. Then they brought me here, and the number turned into objects. A thin mattress on a steel bunk. A tray of food. You eat because you're hungry, not because you want it. A line you stand in with your eyes forward. An inmate ID card you show for everything, like your name is less important than your number. Count. Count again. Time turned into repetition. I got that calendar a few weeks in because I felt myself drifting. The first X I made was shaky. I stared at it like it might move. That little mark was the beginning of my new life. Proof that time was passing, and proof that it was passing without my permission. Years inside rearrange your memory. You remember the smell of floor wax and disinfectant. You remember the clank of the gate. But you start to forget ordinary things from outside, like what your street looked like after rain, or the exact shade of your daughter's hair in the sun. Your old life becomes a picture you keep touching until the edges wear. The calendar becomes your false friend. You start circling things you think matter. Then you watch them arrive in the most ordinary way possible. Your birthday is still count and chow, except maybe someone on the tier says it out loud and you nod like it doesn't hurt. Holidays are the strangest. You can feel them even when nobody says the name. The chow hall does something small and symbolic, and men pretend they don't notice because noticing means remembering what a table looks like when your family is there. Some years I put a small star on December 25 on my calendar, and then I crossed it off like it was any other square, and that was when I understood how prison eats celebration without making a sound. You also learn what it means to age in a place that is not built for softness. Your back hurts, and you still stand for count. Your knees talk back when you climb a stairwell, and you still move with the flow because you don't want to be the slow man blocking the line. You watch younger men come in with bravado and leave with dull eyes. You watch older men disappear. A bunk gets emptied out, property gets bagged, and the unit keeps going. The next night you cross off another day, and the pencil feels heavier. My wife visited in the early years. She sat across from me with her hands folded, trying to be brave with a face that was slowly changing. We talked about the kids. We talked about bills and car trouble. The big thing sat between us like a wall nobody could climb. I watched her carry my absence, and I hated myself for making her do it. Visits slowed. Phone calls became shorter. Not because she was cruel, but because life does not pause for your guilt. People have to keep living. I missed weddings, I missed funerals, I missed the small afternoons you don't know are precious until they're gone. And every night I crossed off another day and pretended the X was moving me towards something. Anger doesn't stop existing just because you're locked up. It just finds new places to hide. In here, it shows up over stupid things. A man crowding you in line, someone taking your seat, a comment you can't ignore because your pride has nowhere else to go. The worst part is that anger still feels good for a moment. It still offers that old lie, you're in control. I saw men lose years over a flash. A fight that lasted seconds and then turned into segregation time, and new charges and another sentence layered on top. I watched it happen, and still told myself I was different, as if my own case wasn't proof that I was exactly that kind of man when I let my temper steer. Denial is sneaky like that. It wears your own voice. About 10 years into my sentence, I felt the heat rising over something small. A younger man said something that hit the same bruise, and I felt my mouth start to fill with words I had no business saying. My body leaned toward the old habit, like it remembered. Then the loudspeaker snapped on and they called an unscheduled count. Lockdown. Everybody in. The doors slammed one after another until the whole unit sounded like a chest closing. Suddenly, there was nowhere to go, nowhere to burn the energy. I sat on my bunk with my hands on my knees and listened to the building settle into forced stillness. That was the first time I had the thought, plain and quiet, that I might die in here. Not in some dramatic scene. Just one night, on a thin mattress, while the place kept running without me. The thought wasn't panic, it was recognition. I stared at my calendar and saw the X marks for what they were, not steps toward freedom, but proof of how easy it is for a life to turn into an address you can't leave. After that lockdown, I started doing what men do when they're trying to survive truth. I looked for a way to make the years mean something besides punishment. I kept my record clean. I worked my job. I started eating slower, not because the food improved, but because rushing made me feel like an animal, and I was trying to remember I was a man. I stopped volunteering for arguments. I chose seats where I could breathe. I learned to leave space between myself and other people in line, the way you leave space around a wound. I signed up for an anger class, not because a class can erase what I did, but because I needed to sit in a room and listen to men describe the same heat in their chest, the same pride that made them feel right, the same regret that came after. I learned language I should have had as a young man. I learned that anger is not strength. It's a surge that makes you feel big for minutes and leaves you small for years. When my first parole hearing came, I believed, like a fool, that good behavior could turn time backward. I sat in that room in a stiff shirt and spoke carefully about remorse and responsibility. I tried to say the dead man's name with respect because he deserved to be more than my mistake. Weeks later, the decision arrived on plain paper. Denied. Not just denied, but pushed far enough into the future that soon died in my mouth. That night I sat on my bunk and stared at my calendar so long my eyes burned. I didn't cross off the day right away. I just listened to the unit breathe and felt the last easy illusion break. The next morning I called my daughter. I waited my turn at the phones, shoulder to shoulder with other men trying to sound normal. You hold the receiver like it's both a lifeline and a weight. You learn to speak fast because the line behind you is long, and you learn to speak carefully because the people on the other end have their own lives and their own exhaustion. When she answered, her voice was warm, careful, grown up in a way that still surprises me. I told her about the denial. I told her I might be in here longer than I'd been willing to admit. There was a silence that felt like she was choosing her words. And then she said softly, "Dad, we can't keep living in that day." That one sentence did more to change me than any punishment ever did. Because she wasn't condemning me. She was telling the truth. My anger had not only killed a man, it had held my family in the same moment for years, pulling them back into my hope and disappointment and shame, asking their love to carry weight it wasn't built for. After that call, nothing got easy. The walls stayed. The count stayed. The calendar kept waiting for my pencil. But my relationship with my anger changed in small, plain ways. When I felt it rise, I stopped feeding it with stories about what people deserved. I would sit on the edge of my bunk and put both feet flat on the floor until the heat passed. I wrote letters I did not send, not to earn forgiveness, but to stop lying to myself about what I had done. Sometimes I wrote the date at the top, and then I looked at my calendar and realized how many dates I had already burned through. That was sobering in a way no lecture ever was. I started crossing off the calendar, not as a countdown to a date I couldn't control, but as a record of days I didn't let my temper add new damage. There is a kind of pride in that, but it's a different kind. It's not the pride that demands a win, it's the pride of restraint, quiet and unglamorous, like keeping a roof from leaking. I also stopped trying to sound tough on the phone. That was harder than any class. It is strange how pride can survive prison. I began telling my daughter when I was scared. I began telling my son when I missed him. I did not ask them to fix me, and I did not demand comfort. I just told the truth, and I let the silence be part of the conversation. Here is what I know now, at 78, sitting under fluorescent lights that never quite feel like daylight. Punishment is a sentence. Responsibility is a lifetime. Punishment is doing time. Responsibility is looking at what your 10 minutes took from other people and refusing to act like your regret cancels it out. Anger is not just an emotion, it is a creditor. It gives you the feeling of power up front, and then it charges you interest. The interest is paid in holidays you don't attend, in hands you don't get to hold, in apologies you can't make face to face, in the way your name becomes a number on an ID card, in the way your family learns to live without expecting you. I live inside that interest. I will live inside it until I die. I used to think the interest was paid only in years. I was wrong. It's paid in small daily humiliations too. It's paid when a guard tells you to face forward and you obey because you have no leverage left. It's paid when you stand in line for a phone call and hear another man speaking to his mother and you realize you have turned your own mother's voice into something you can only imagine. It's paid when you look at your hands, older now, and you remember exactly what they did in 10 minutes, and you understand that the hands that built a life can also end one. Some nights I stare at the calendar and I try to remember the exact moment when I could have chosen differently. It's painful how ordinary it was. No weapon, no long plan, just a man refusing to swallow his pride. That's what makes it so frightening. People imagine ruin arrives with a warning label. Sometimes ruin arrives in the same tone you have used 1,000 times, and the only difference is this time it lands on the wrong person, in the wrong place, and it cannot be taken back. Tonight I will cross off another square on my calendar. I will stand for count. I will eat whatever ends up on the tray. I will lie down on my bunk and listen to the building settle, and I will think about a man on a pavement and a family that lost him. And I will think about my daughter's voice saying she couldn't keep living in that day. If you are listening to me from a place you can leave, hold on to that ordinary freedom, like it is real currency, because it is. When you feel that heat rise and your pride tells you to prove something, remember that you are being offered the same trade I took. 10 minutes can feel like control. 30 years feels like a calendar full of X marks. Stay free in the ways that actually matter. Keep your hands down. Keep your life.